Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Kostas. I know most of you here. I have the pleasure of having worked with many of you. And we have some people that have been introduced here today, which is a great pleasure, and I look forward to know about your work throughout this workshop. So this is a workshop we organize around the informal sector, the informal recycling sector, the waste pickers in the global south. Sorry for that, I don't know what went wrong. And the opportunity we have to organize this comes from British Council Newton Fund Institutional Skills call that we've been working for the last 1 year. And as part of this, we had the opportunity to have our Brazilian friends visiting us, and I'll be introducing to them very soon. So we thought that it was a good opportunity not only to hear about this new tool we're developing as part of this research project, this SOCO tool, but also explain some other work we've been doing over the years. And this is the work that you can see it at these posters at the back. And as you can see, there have been many different funding bodies, many different organizations, many people involved in those. So I won't really take much of your time in the opening remarks today. What I have created is there is a hashtag if you want to tweet anything, which feel free to do so. And the tools we're going to be talking about is one is Waste Aware, the other is CIVOR, EWID, SOCO, Intera, and so on. I won't bother you with the details now. You will listen soon from the presenters. But what I would like to say is that it's really heartening the fact that all these efforts we've been putting in this research area and activity are not just sit somewhere in the abstract sphere of papers and conferences, and there is some real impact in the world. And this is very, very important to us. And of course, now academics are encouraged to have more impact, but still we've been doing that anyway. So this is a photo from a workshop we organized many years ago in Buenos Aires as part of the Globalization and Waste Management Task Force. And we've been working with Professor Wilson there to understand the globalization aspects of informal sector. Sorry, this keeps going out of action, I'm not sure why. So we convened this workshop in Buenos Aires. It was a lot of background work done for this, and it was a difficult workshop because it was the first time we gathered together many stakeholders from the informal sector, from the industry, from the municipality, regional government, sociologists, engineers, and everybody speaks a different language, not only literal language, but also technical language. And this is one of the major challenges. However, despite all the difficulties and the tensions, and there were some tense moments, we've been able to do something. We've been able eventually to change ISVES, for instance. The International Solid Waste Association has transformed through that. And from a time that 5 years ago wasn't able to talk about informal sector at all, it was out of sight, out of mind, hiding everything under the carpet. Now they're running a global campaign about closing the dump sites and having specific provisions, specific care, what to do, how to ensure that the people who are recovering resources on the dump site, the waste pickers, are not negatively affected. So I would really encourage you to go on this website, and maybe you would like to see the petition and sign the petition. This is about transforming waste management, but also still having a positive impact on people's lives. What else we've done? I was proud to be involved in the first effort that has been placed on a European Union level to create a research agenda around resource recovery from waste in Africa. And what we've seen there is the fact that Africa also has loads and loads of challenges. Some of them relate to the recovery also of electronic resources, and Ines will tell you more about it later. But we really managed to incorporate this research we've been doing into this research agenda, and then have some real projects that have been implemented. So the work found its way to policy, to high-level documents, and then down in more realities, as you'll hear quite soon. Professor Wilson was also leading the Global Waste Management Commission by UNEP. It was the first global overview about waste management and focusing also on developing countries. This adopted a lot of the data, for instance, we've been developing on Waste Aware, and you'll hear more about it later on. But definitely, this is an achievement for the sector. We, the very first time, we know how the world manages its waste, and the waste pickers, their contribution to recycling, their concerns, their prospects are really explicitly mentioned in that United Nations document. So I think we've really come a long way in this sector, and we're pleased to see our efforts really turning into some form of reality. Still, there's a lot to be done. Things are changing. In the resource recovery agenda, in the waste management recovery agenda, someone has to teach me how to make this work. So what happens is that we have new arrivals, the concept of circular economy, and it's something that we would like to discuss throughout the day. So the arrival of the circular economy concept, and here you have prominent economists, Professor Gary Dymski will have the ability to tell you more about in the panel session, but it's changing really how we're gonna work with materials and products and everything. So this poses new opportunities and challenges for the waste pickers around the world, and we have to rethink about it. Also, there have been many, many years of efforts, over 30 years of efforts on this topic. What have we achieved? Have we learned something? Have we achieved really a major transformation that we've been hoping to be achieved? I've written some thoughts on an editorial. Some of them are provocative. If you find them provocative, that's a good thing, because the idea is not just to be pleasant. The idea is to be able to tackle the challenging aspects. So possibly you have in your notes a draft version of it. It's not published yet. It's going to be published at the end of the month in early April. So feel free to read it now and include it into your analysis, and see the final thing maybe with some small changes. Last but not least, there are a lot of my students and a lot of people who work in research teams with me, and I would like to thank them so much. This is just some of the people I work here at the University of Leeds, but practically everything we say and present here is the outcome of so many hours, so many brains, so much collaboration, and really I would like to thank each and one of them for all the efforts and all the results. And in particular, I would like just to point out now, before everybody leaves, Ms. Heather Pershaus, Heather, who really done the most for this workshop to run today, and it wouldn't be happening without Heather's great efforts. So with that, I will really stop here. I remind you that we have this hashtag if you want to tweet about the event. We have access to internet, I guess, as guests here, so please do register. It's for free. And with that, without no further delay, I would like to introduce our renowned guests from Brazil. And we have now the pleasure of having for the next hour or so, until 11:30, to have a presentation from three of our guests, and we have Dr. Jacqueline Rutkowski from Instituto Sustenar. I can't pronounce this proper Brazilian, but Jacqueline, you're a director or president, I'm not sure what's the right translation, of recycling, of Reference Center for Recycling, operated by the government of Minas Gerais. It's a regional government in Brazil. And of course, we have also Dr. Emilia Rutkowski from University of Campinas. Emilia, you will be telling us about your research efforts also, and you're running there, you're associate professor, you have in your research group called Fluxus, is covering all of socioeconomic aspects, engineering, so it's very interesting what you're doing. And of course, we have the great pleasure of having people who do the job and lead the transformation of the informal sector on the ground. So Vilma de Silva Estevam has joined us here from Brazil. She's president of Copesol Leste, which is one of the cooperatives, major cooperatives in Belo Horizonte in Brazil. We visited the cooperative and we tried to understand it more. So these cooperatives were very important, taking people out of the unorganized thing and giving them dignity, giving them a standardized way to work. And we look forward, Vilma, to know more about your experiences and challenges also, to see how we can help things move forward. We have more people from the Brazilian delegation, America. You're a civil engineer and you're working also with major organizations such as INSEA. Jefferson, you're doing your MSc here, so we have a fantastic team that is visiting us, and by all means, please interact with our esteemed guests. All right, I think I've talked too much, really, so the floor is yours, and maybe you have to deal with the microphone, I'm not sure, but please, the floor is yours.
Good morning. It's really very nice to be here. Thank you, Costas, for inviting me this very interesting workshop.
Agradecendo, dizendo que é muito bom estar aqui. Agradecer o Costas.
It's very interesting. I think it's going to make quite a difference for us as well in South America. Although we have a lot of things to Africa.
Que é interessante estar vendo os trabalhos que são feitos na África aqui, para a gente também é muito interessante conhecer.
What we decide to do here, we are going to talk to you about this 20 years now of fighting that the catadores, the waste picker, are doing in Brazil, what they achieved so far.
Nós vamos tentar mostrar para vocês os 20 anos de luta dos catadores no Brasil.
She's the one that is in front of all this for the past 5 years, trying to get a decent work and dignity as she deserves. Right? So, okay, it's better if I do that. Right, can I have a pointer? Shall I stay here? So, we have a group in Brazil because we've been at universities, some NGOs, some consultancy people, some technical people, people from that working with what we call pastoral from the Catholic Church, lots of different groups. I've been working with these people that were just on the street, trying to do their living, being very badly treated. And we started to get more and more together because we're working with the same people. And we realized that we need to organize ourselves as a network. And we call this network an Inclusive and Solidary Recycling Observatory. And now we have 2 different universities and 3 different nucleus or laboratories. Those laboratories They all civil and engineer faculty, mechanical engineer, civil engineer in architecture and urban studies where I am. And then we have INSEA, that's an organization that's been for more than 30 years now working with the inclusion of people that are on risk situation on the street, all sorts of different situations they've gotten from different cities in Brazil, all over Brazil, from Amazon down south in Brazil. And WIGO, that's an international organization that works mainly with women. Banco do Brasil, we've been for the last 20 years having Banco do Brasil very interested in this and helping us, not only the Banco do Brasil in Minas Gerais, but the foundation of Banco do Brasil. They used to do a lot of this work. We don't know what's going to happen now, because after the Brazilian Cope, we don't know what's going to happen. Sustentar, that's an institute, an NGO that works with sustainability, and they have 2 engineers there as well. They're worried about all this social problems, social repercussion of the technologies. So this network is a place where we want to discuss things and want to get all this theory and all this technology being produced at university and all in the center, and see it being appropriated by the people that need it. That's what we want to do. We have 2 big seminars in Brazil, a Brazilian one, international one, and now the 6th seminar. We're always trying to get people from all different parts of the world to discuss these things with us, that have experience that could help us to make a difference in Brazil. And we have Anne was on being there with us, and it was really incredible the time when she was there. So the first thing we've been always talking is that garbage beaker haven't just appeared like that, from 1990. You have having this since 1890. We have people that been doing the same thing that they are doing nowadays in all sorts of different bits and pieces of the world, and they have all these different names. You never know how we're going to call them. But now we decide that we're going, in English at least, we're going to call them waste speakers. In Brazil, they have a huge official name. It's called Catadores de Materiais Recicláveis e Reutilizáveis. That's the official name now. So, in Brazil, back in the 70s and in the 80s, we had this huge crisis, and we have unemployment everywhere. I had just finished my university degree in 1976, and I am from the first group that finished university, got out of the street and said, oops, no job for the first time, and everyone was just really, didn't know where to go, what we're supposed to do about that. So people that didn't have university degree was in a worse situation. And lots of people just started living, or they've been living in dump areas, but this volume of this amount of people has just been going up and up and up since the 70s. And in the 80s, it becomes a huge situation in Brazil that Catholic groups like the Street Pastoral and the Fraternal Assistance Organization, they're very big organizations in Brazil, they start fighting the persecution, both the political persecution, the police persecution for these people. Because you're just killing people in the street. By night, you just appear, lots of people disappear, people like that. They start trying to do what they call the sanitation actions, because they need the city to get clean. Actually, they've been gentrifying everything, doing an eugenic situation with the city, to have all these places, most of these places were in the city center, and you have all the facilities, and they just don't want these people there anymore. Because they've been cleaning up everything and putting these people in an even worse situation than they used to have. So these Catholic groups were contacting these people, these workers in the street. They have, like you see in these pictures, how the meeting was done at the street or in the viaduct. And they have street assemblies. They've been mobilizing people in any sort of situation, any sort of place, because the situation was pretty bad for them. And we have an incident, a very bad incident in Brazil in 1988. Some grandmother that lives in a dump field, she does find some meat, and she smelled it and said, well, it smells good, so she cooked it and gave it to her grandson. And this grandson started not feeling very well. She took it to the hospital, and then they just discovered that one hospital was just dumping bits of people at the dump area, you know. And then this became huge in Brazil. UNICEF and the children pastoral started calling everyone and said, well, we need to change it. We can't carry on like that. And these people, the street pastoral was getting out these people from big cities like São Paulo, like Belo Horizonte, trying to organize them. And the two first cooperatives or assemblies in Brazil from waste pickers was Copamari in São Paulo, that was supported by this fraternal assistance organization, and Asmari in Belo Horizonte, that was supported by the street pastoral. And from all this situation that was carrying on in Brazil, we start this movement that calls Waste and Citizenship. You know, the UNICEF and the pastoral, the street pastoral and the children pastoral call everyone, every single person or organization to just start talking about that and trying to make a difference with them. So when we start looking at it and see what we have, then we find that we have more than 45 children working in dump areas all over Brazil. That every single town and city in Brazil has a very huge dump site, you know, and people are just not seeing it. And that we have been recycling all the time from Brazil, but recycling Brazil was very sustainable, but was sustained on misery, you know, very, very miserable people taking it. So they organize what they call a Forum of Waste and Citizenship, and they have this permanent campaign. We are never sort of relaxing with that. Children to the trash, no more. That was the main call. You know? And they had three proposals. This forum, we have three proposals in this forum: to eradicate child labor, elect the waste picker as priority partners in the selective collection, with guarantee of work and income, and eradicate the dumps and reclaim the degraded areas. Those are the three main goals, and we still carrying on these things since the beginning of the 90s. And something will be happening in the beginning of this century, like the International Labour Organization, that in 2000 just had a resolution that says that working this ways is the worst child work that we can have. And because of that, we managed to convince the federal government of Brazil that they had to prioritize the kids that are from mothers that work in dump sites, or kids that are working in dump sites, to be the first kids that we are going to take out of the dump site and put them at school. So we managed in something like 2 or 3 years to have 46,000 children attended and out of the dump site. But we still haven't finished on, we haven't taking all the children. We still have children living downsized in some different cities, not on the major cities of Brazil, in southeast or in the northeast, in the south, but we have some in Amazon region, and in Pantanal region we still have it happening. So in 2001 was the first National Congress of Brazilian Waste Speakers. They organized their own congress. It was something like 1,700 waste speakers from all over Brazil, and they took history to their own hands and decided, well, that's how we're going to do it. We need to fight. We need to be in front of facing that. We don't have people to speak for us. We are going to do that. And they organized themselves, and they had this prioritized as well. That's not just a national movement, that must be a South American movement, a Latin American movement, and a world movement. So they with the social forum that was in Brazil at the same time, helped a lot. And because of all these social movements, we managed to get some very important things happening in Brazil as far as public policies goes. First, in 2005, in Brazil we have what we call the Brazilian Catalogue of Occupation. If Brazil recognizes something as a profession, this profession is going to be in this catalogue. And in 2005, the recyclable material picker was signing, so now they are recognizing Brazil as a profession. In 2007, our Biden law had a waiver rule to say that if any municipality, any public service want to hire a cooperative of waste speaker, they don't need to do the waiver rule that you need to do that in our public service. If they are waste speakers cooperative, is that the only way they can do that. It's very explicit. It's all these letters there. And then we have the Brazilian National Sanitation Law that reinforced that, and the Brazilian National Waste Resources Law. The Brazilian National Waste Resource Collection Act said very clearly that any selective collection must include catadores, must include waste speaker arrangement. It's a priority to hire a waste speaker to do that. We have something that we call reverse logistics. That's our way to discuss responsibility to the producer. And we're now having all this discussion all over Brazil. So how this agreement is going to go. But they need to have the catadores sitting with them discussing it. And now we are in this, that is the phase we are now. We're having this agreement for reverse logistics going on. We saw the packing sector, and first we need to have it in a federal government, and after that we are going to have it in all the states government. That's how Brazil does it, and then you have to go up in the end at the municipality, because all the waste is going to be at the municipality level. So they are trying to integrate and articulate all these actions, but it's quite difficult to do that because we have a lot of things that just dump in Brazil. And all the factors that are there, the industry say, well, we can take care of ours, but we don't want to take care of the things that just came from Asia, and we don't know who has done that and how it's going to work. We have this it's a discussion that's an endless discussion about that.
Okay? And you know that you have yet to solve a big problem, because 50% of our waste are composed by organic waste, and in Brazil you don't do anything about this. It's landfilling nowadays. So we think that we have to develop some proposal, some technical proposal to work with organic waste. And we think it will be better if you can develop something with waste pickers inclusion, because we already have a great unemployment in Brazil, and we have big inequality. So you have people that need to have work. So perhaps it can be a good challenge, how to solve the organic waste with inclusion also, okay? And so in Brazil you have mainland, and so the mainly treatment you do, the final disposal you do, is landfill, okay? So this is what we name the technological route to a urban solidary selective collection, okay? Well, and this is only to demonstrate to you the different ways waste pickers use to collect material, okay? You see, most of, in most cases, they use this kind of truck, okay? They adapted the truck to increase the volume the truck can catch. But you have also some cities that do this. This is a compacted truck that the city puts adapted something that collect the material to give to catadores, okay? And you have, this is a manual cart, and this is a gasoline, a gas cart, okay? Well, to finish, so, what do you think about is our challenge as academics, as researchers, as technicians that work with catadores in Brazil? Well, we are a feeling and some data also that prove to us that this kind of selective collection that we call solidarity selective collection, it's more effectiveness, because catadores can reach a greater area using this multimodal way of transport, okay? They can sensibilize population for recyclable selection, because it's not an environment question or economic question. It's not only a question of tax. You have to pay if you refuse the recycling, as common, for example, in the United States or Europe. When catadores discuss with population about the selective collection, population feels that they are doing a job to support someone that needs this support. And it's a simple support, because I'm only doing a source separation in my home, so it's easy to do, okay? Because of it, we can see that when catadores do the selective collection, populations separate more, a greater volume, okay? Because they want to help the catadores family, okay? And also, as I said, catadores can get to traditional, in areas where the traditional collection system can't go, okay? Well, there are also technical efficiency. Is a greater volume is subtracted from urban waste. This data from 2 cities where cooperative are hired as a private provider service. They are hired to do the selective collection in a formal way. Natal is a capital of a state in northeast of Brazil. It's a beautiful city. If you want to visit it, it's worth because there is marvelous beach there. Okay, and after catadores were hired, they grade the amount collected from 42 tons by a month to 298 tons by a month in 12 months. Okay? And Itaúna is the stud case that you use in Soco also now. You have almost from 100 to 200 in 30 days of work. Okay? And the discarded material reduced very much. Okay? And we think that in this model, the sustainability of all the system increase because you have growth of income, waste pickers' income, and growth of waste pickers' productivity. So all the system is better sustainable. Okay? This is data of annual research done in Brazil. It's done by SEMPRE. They ask cities to inform how much they collect in selective collection and how much they pay to selective collection. Okay? The cities answer this to SEMPRE. And this data, it's a research that began in 1999, and the last data is 2012. And we compare here Belo Horizonte, it's my city. In Belo Horizonte, the selective collection is done by a company, a private company. In Londrina is a city in Paraná, another state, where the selective collection is done by catadores since since 2002, but there isn't data here. Okay, so you can see that the amount collected, for example, in the 2012 in Belo Horizonte was 871 tons a month, and in Londrina it was 1,000. But Londrina has 500,000 inhabitants. And Belo Horizonte is 4 times greater. So it must collect much more than Londrina. Okay? But it's not what happened indeed. And the cost, Belo Horizonte pay $195 by ton, and Londrina only 35, and in very good conditions. It's not a problem of bad conditions of work, okay? So we think that this model have better environment results, more material recycled, less waste onto landfill, okay? So, but we have some challenges, okay? First of all, it's necessary to widespread this technology, first to waste professionals, because it's not a technology is studied at universities. So if you did not learn in university, the technical, the professional that will organize the city waste management don't know how to organize this technology. So it has to be disseminated in the universities and technical institutions and so on. Because of it, also, we have audience have some efforts to systematize this information and to disseminate it. SOCO is one of these efforts, okay? And we have also organized an e-learning course for management, that you have all the material already done, but you can, unfortunately, begin to do this course because you can reach money to support this course. But you have all material, all technical material already done. Well, you have also to stimulate countries with unskilled workers to appropriate of this social technology, because we can see that it's helpful to reduce misery and poverty, okay? And we also to discuss about waste management, that you have to give priority, guaranteed priority for recycling, and you have to avoid technologies that could compete for recycled material, such, for example, incineration, because there is a direct competition. Okay? You can also, another challenge that you can see in this work we have done, it's absolutely necessary to work with participatory methodologies to planning waste management system. You have to be able to join theoretical and practical knowledge to construct really community-based refuse collection and recycling programs. It's not easy. It's not easy, particularly to us, engineering. We're not eager to work with participatory methodologies. We like quantify things, not to discuss things, okay? You have also to define sustainable means of financing the waste PICS cooperatives, because in Brazil you don't have economic tools to offer to waste pickers cooperatives, but you call it popular cooperatives, to get money to finance themselves. We only have proposal to finance companies, private, normal, conventional companies. Okay? It's a great problem. Also, we can see that networks of cooperatives are very useful to improve the conditions that the waste pickers can sell the material. But we have also to work to understand how to disseminate this way of organization, because it's not easy. There are many challenges to do it. And we have also to discuss and to understand how exactly waste pickers can advance in the productive chain, how they can become a player in such global chain. It's a knowledge you have to develop. And I think you can help us very much about it. And we think that we have some knowledge that is done to be disseminated around the world, because you have many similarities in other countries that the Brazilian waste pickers experience certainly can help. Okay? So, I thank you very much. I want to say that it was a pleasure to have this opportunity to talk to you about what are you doing in Brazil. I apologize by my poor English, but we are trying to improve it because we are very interested in discuss with you and to change experience with you, because we think that we have many knowledge in this room that you can share, of course. Thank you very much.
Quero agradecer o Costa, né? Se não fosse a visita dele, a ida dele ao Brasil, em Belo Horizonte, eu não estaria aqui, né? Então quero agradecer o Oz, na pessoa da Jaqueline e a Emília.
Well, she's thanking you, Costa. She said that if you weren't going to Brazil, she wasn't going to be here, so she's thanking you and others for the opportunity to be here, talking to you.
É melhor você sentar, não é?
Bom, a cooperativa surgiu em 2003, foi a fundação da cooperativa, com 25 cooperados. Em 2005, por intermédio do Fórum Municipal de Cidadania, a Prefeitura concordou em conceder um galpão para a cooperativa. E em 2010, a inauguração do galpão de triagem, aproximadamente 40 cooperados, que se dividem em atividade de triagem fina, prensagem, atividades auxiliares e a coordenação. A gente recebe, em média, material coletado dos domicílios por empresa terceirizada, contratada pela Prefeitura de Belo Horizonte. Coletam também materiais em empresas e outros grandes geradores.
They receive material from a contractor that the Belo Horizonte municipality contracts for taking this material there, and the big producer that take material themselves to the cooperative.
Like industry, supermarkets.
Essa coleta em outros grandes geradores, ela é feita por caminhão próprio da cooperativa. Em 2014, a empresa terceirizada iniciou a utilização de caminhões compactadores. Em 2015, a cooperativa ela foi contratada para realizar a coleta seletiva porta a porta, em um bairro da cidade, como um projeto piloto. Dentro desse projeto, teve uma demanda, né, colocada pelos catadores, uma negociação com a prefeitura, SLU, o apoio da UFMG, uma faculdade federal, com a sociedade civil, a rede de catadores, e através dessa participação é que iniciou-se o projeto piloto, né, o pagamento da mobilização por domicílio visitado e da coleta por tonelada coletada e transportada para o galpão.
She's saying that they had this agreement in Brazil, in Belo Horizonte, that they have the university, they have all the organizations, and they were pressing, helping them to negotiate with the municipality. That's how they managed to get it, and they are paid not only for collecting, but to mobilize people to do it in the right way for them to be able to pick it up. Okay? And here's a map just to tell you where Minas Gerais is, where Belo Horizonte is in Minas Gerais, and that star, green star, is where they are collecting in the city. That's the region they are collecting. They are hired to collect.
Dentro desse contrato havia uma meta que é 2,40
uma meta de 2.400 domicílios visitados, com 3 toneladas. Essa meta era 3 toneladas por semana, havia uma previsão. Dentro deste contrato, também houve porque havia uma estimativa que seria 12 toneladas mês, 44 anos. E como não atingiu essa estimativa, ela não foi atingida, em 2017 houve a ampliação, a renovação do contrato. Porque o contrato, a renovação dele é 1 ano, né? Cada ano se renova o contrato. Como a estimativa ela não foi atingida, então houve uma ampliação de uma área no próprio bairro, mas porém com ampliação de domicílios.
Well, the contractor has this estimative and they couldn't accomplish it, so they just amplify the area. They have a bigger area now, just close by in the same district, to try from 2017, because they have a year contract. So they renovate the contract and they amplify, they reach a bigger area now to make sure that they can get to the goal.
A remuneração recebida hoje, ela só cobre o custo, porque o custo operacional da coleta seletiva. Na ampliação, a gente conseguiu um reajuste do valor pago, porque o valor ele era inferior, porque a gente não tinha atingido a meta coletada, então é pago sobre coloca aí o valor é pago por tonelada coletada. Mas não foi o suficiente para cobrir os custos.
Well, they pay for the collected tons, and the amount of tons of waste that they manage to collect is not enough to cover all the costs. So that's something that they actually discuss with the municipality, and then they has a bigger area now to collect.
A gente tinha um modelo de serviço que era feito pelo município, feito pela empresa privada e a cooperativa, a associação, é a parte de triagem e a parte de comercialização. Com essa negociação, houve-se uma melhoria na questão tanto da prestação de serviço hoje, como também na questão da mobilização social, porque antes a prefeitura ela fazia essa mobilização social, ela que ia fazer isso na fonte. A empresa, a gente viu que a preocupação da empresa, ela foi contratada só para poder fazer a coleta, mas que ela não tinha nenhuma preocupação de como esse material iria chegar na cooperativa. E a gente entendeu que era importante a cooperativa ela assumir todo o processo. Por que era importante a cooperativa assumir o processo? Porque a gente queria uma coleta seletiva que fosse diferenciada. Por que diferenciada? Porque a gente queria ter uma aproximação maior com a população. Também pensando de como esse material, trabalhar a qualidade desse material, como armazenar esse material.
Well, what she's saying is that what happened, this is the model that used to be in the city, and with this model, what problem we had is the cooperative was just sorting and commercialization. There wasn't enough, and the contractor wasn't interested to bring a very nice quality material for them. They're just receiving to collect it, and they collect in a way that they have a lot of things that reject material. So it was very high rejecting amount of material, and when they start collecting it, the material got better quality. Now they have people more interested, very sensibilized to do that, and before was this municipality. They have these workers that went to the houses to tell people that they should do the segregate material. But they don't have enough people to do that. They don't understand much about exactly what they're going to do with that material. So people went and sensibilized, and they are now that the cooperative is doing this as well with them. You know, people are more willing to do that, as Jacqueline had pointed out. They now has a face-to-face conversation about this thing, and then they know where it's going, how important it is to another person to have it done properly.
No resultado, né, a discussão, a mobilização, a população ela tem uma compreensão, né, sobre a adesão da informação, sobre a separação na fonte do material. A cooperativa ela faz uma solicitação junto à população sobre a questão da separação do vidro, como condicionar esse vidro para evitar risco de acidentes.
Now that they are discussing with the population, they can talk to them about glass, for instance, how they need to need to package it in a way that that's not going to have more accident. Before, when the company was just getting this, they have accident all the time because they just throw glasses in with not an adequate way. And the people are more sensibilized for that.
A coleta feita pela cooperativa, ela já faz uma pré-triagem de papelão na baia, a gente chama baia do caminhão, porque o caminhão ele tem umas repartições dentro, então a gente consegue fazer o condicionamento desse papelão dentro do caminhão. A gente consegue também fazer essa separação do vidro, porque a gente consegue colocar um bag.
What they're doing now in the truck, they divide the truck, so they can pre-sorted cardboard and glasses inside the truck. So not just people do it more properly at home, but they already start doing it in a different way when they put it in the truck as well.
O vidro ele é organizado também dentro do bag, dentro do caminhão. O descarregamento desse material em armazenagem, ele é feito dentro dos bags. Por que nós adotamos esse sistema? Porque parte hoje da coleta seletiva em Belo Horizonte é feita em caminhão compactador. E a diferença desse contrato é porque é feita em caminhão baú. Então, como ela é feita em caminhão baú, a gente consegue armazenar melhor esse material, a gente consegue fazer uma pré-triagem desse material, a gente consegue fazer também uma pesagem do vidro dentro do caminhão. Por que a cooperativa ela adotou? Porque a gente precisava mostrar para a prefeitura.
They have this, what do you call it? The truck they have. I don't know what the
Compactor truck.
Not the compactor truck, the other one.
Open truck.
No, they call it in Brazil like
You call it just a state body or like a cattle truck.
Yes, a cattle truck.
Yeah.
Okay. So when they had the company in Belo Horizonte has the compactor truck, so they just mix everything together. They said they are not compacting so hard, so it's okay to compact a little bit to take the recycle to them. Now they have this other type of truck, so they put everything in bags. You know, they get it out of the houses and they put it in bags. They start separating inside the truck. And the other thing they managed to do is when they arrive in the cooperative, they weigh it. So they can weigh the glasses, they can weigh separate of everything, they can weigh the cardboard, they can weigh everything previous to the sorting process. And they are already in bags, so it's more protected. And they start doing that because they want to prove to the municipality the real amount of recycling that they are taking in from the landfill or from the streets.
Todo esse material, no dia de coleta, ele é feito todo separado, sem misturar com outros, com o vidro. A gente consegue também fazer separação do rejeito.
And the other thing is they can just separate the rejected material much easier in this way.
Foi a única forma que a gente achou de, até mesmo de provar para a prefeitura que essa é a ideal. Né? O modelo de sistema deles, feito caminhão compactador, ele compacta o material e dificulta muito a produtividade do triador.
That's way they managed to prove that if you don't have a compactor truck, you're going to have a better material and you're going to have a healthier way to work, and you have a better, and more material is not going to be rejected.
Esse é o caminhão, que é o caminhão baú, que é feito
hoje.
A coleta porta a porta.
And you have this guy here that's sorting the cardboard.
What happens to the rejected materials?
Goes to the dump field.
The landfill.
The landfill. Sorry.
Belo Horizonte has a landfill.
The landfill. They don't have a dump field anymore in Belo Horizonte. Landfill. Sorry. Okay.
Right, so we're really running out of time.
We are finished.
Yeah.
Então, assim, as diferenças, né? Melhora da qualidade, a quantidade do material coletado. Então, assim, há uma diferença entre a cooperativa coletar e a prefeitura coletar. Porque você tem uma qualidade melhor do material, você melhora as condições de trabalho do triador também, melhora a renda e aumenta também a quantidade de material separado.
Well, they just have better situation because you can improve everything as being written there. You have better quality of material, greater quantity of material, people work in a better condition, and they can commercialize better the material. So if the solitary selective collection starts the source separation to the commercialization, they just have a win situation.
O impacto na produtividade de triagem, tonelada por pessoa, a gente mostrou que a pessoa trabalhando nesse material coletado pela cooperativa teve um avanço, um ganho maior do que os que trabalham com o material hoje feito pela prefeitura, porque você tem uma qualidade de material, há uma conscientização melhor da população com relação ao armazenamento desse material, a qualidade desse material. Então a gente fez essa diferença para mostrar qual que é o ganho, o resultado que teve a pessoa trabalhando esse material coletado pela cooperativa e uma pessoa trabalhando material coletado feito pela prefeitura.
So they just made an experiment and put people to work with material that came from the contractor, material that they have collected. And then they could prove to the municipality that the quality of the material was much better when it comes from their own collection, instead of the compactor truck that the contractor was doing.
O resultado, ele permite a ação dos catadores como agente de mobilização, um contato direto com a população, melhoria na qualidade do material coletado, não levar lixo para o galpão, permite uma pré-triagem.
The first thing is they are not going to take trash to the warehouse. That's a great thing for them. they have this pre-sorting thing that helps them to improve in what they are doing, and the garbage people, the waste people start talking to the population, and that's made quite a difference in the way they've been treated, surrounded by these people, if they're talking to them and they know them.
A remuneração gera uma renda maior para a cooperativa, que é a da venda do material, melhoria nas condições de trabalho, permite aumentar a eficiência da produção, sem deteriorar as condições de trabalho.
And the most important thing, they improve efficiency without worsening the work conditions, and they get better pay in the end.
Thank you.
That's my Brazilian outfit. But, hello? Okay. So, we'll try to run this very briefly, really. What is the next stage? Next stage is that we're going to present you a series of tools we've been developing over many, many years, and with many, many collaborators and support. And you can see those tools in the posters at the back of this room, and also are into your delegate pack. We have those posters. We make them, of course, available those online. But the idea here is just to very rapidly introduce you to those tools. The key idea of what they're doing, we cannot go into great detail, but the idea is to just get a feel, and then you'll be able, hopefully, to use them if you're interested. Waste-aware cities indicators. Loads of international efforts on that. Professor Wilson has been leading and been critical in making it happen, but we have more people. Dr. Anne Seinberg, we are on this paper together that we published the latest version. This is a tool that looks at how the cities are really doing with the waste management. The major problem we're having globally is that we cannot have reliable, comparable data. So this was a concerted effort to create a way to register data and make a set of indicators that are going to reflect this data. So you can use it for benchmarking purposes over time, or to compare different cities. There are a lot of difficulties when you're trying to compare things across the world, but at very least, these benchmark indicators, for the very first time, explicitly take into account the informal recycling. So you have a tool there that measures the work that is done into resource recovery by the waste pickers. This is based on the concept of integrated sustainable waste management. This was developed back 20 years and more, starting in the Netherlands. And the important thing to remember is that it's not only the engineering parts that matter. It's not just how we collect, how we dispose, how we recover resources. The technical aspects, the engineering and material properties are absolutely fundamental, cannot be ignored. But you can get all those rights without getting the governance aspects right, and inclusivity, the financial sustainability, the institutions about participation on many levels. And if you don't get those rights right, the physical, the engineering aspects cannot work. So that's why the tool is based on that concept and tries to balance and measure both, no matter how difficult it is to pin down and quantify some of the governance aspects. And this is just one example of applying those indicators. So there are 12 different indicators with sub-indicators with a very specific methodology. This is freely available to use. And essentially, we're having different ways trying to visualize the outcomes through a traffic scoring system. The good thing is that it has been very widely applied with efforts from many research and practitioners teams all over the world. We're in the process now of having almost 40 cities being profiled around the world, and this is the most comprehensive, reliable data set that exists worldwide. This is actually being reflected in many efforts. I will show you about this in a moment. I was just, right? I was just wanted to show you a comparative thing, looking at the least affluent cities to the most affluent cities, and how is the split in recycling rates, recycling rate achievement between the formal industry and the informal. And as you see, in the vast part of the world, it's really the informal sector that is doing the hard job and is collecting and recycling the materials. Only in the very affluent ones we have the higher, the formal industry, and achieve some higher recycling rates just because you have a collection also of the organics. So this data set has been included in the Global Waste Management Outlook. The concept has been adopted also by this UNEP guidance on national solid waste management strategies. And recently we have the Population Resources Bureau also adopting this data. Now, the even better news is that with really doesn't like me. So is that we're having now an effort, ongoing effort at the moment, and within the next couple of months, I'm not sure really when, but keep an eye on that. We're going to have a new website that is going to showcase all this data and give you the ability to run the tool and deploy it more globally. So definitely this is an area where you can capture the value of the informal sector and see it, put it into a global perspective of recycling rates around the world. So I think is an important way, of course, not only for the informal sector, but because we're discussing informal sector today, waste management is an important way to have this been accounted for. And that's it. So that was the short introduction to that. And if you have any questions to that now, we're going to spend the next 5 minutes taking some questions on that. So another tool we developed over the years, I've mentioned the international workshop we've done in Buenos Aires many years ago. And this is the Integration Radar. So this offers a way to think, to analyze informal recycling systems, but also to visualize how they are performing. It has two aspects. One aspect is if you have a situation on the ground and you want to see how, to the degree, you're going to measure the degree that is integrated into the wider resource recovery systems, you can use this tool. Also, if you're designing interventions for future, so you're planning your system for the future, and you want to consider how you can integrate, how you can take the informal sector into account and be part of the solution, you can use this particular tool. So how does it work? The idea, of course, is the inclusion or integration and along the lines that Vilma has been presenting before. So what we have done, this was based really on all the academic literature, which wasn't much at the time, but also on all the practitioners' knowledge we could gather and the knowledge we gathered from the workshop. And we incorporated and distilled this into a framework, an analytical framework, a more abstract thing. So we identified key aspects that were really important in the function of the informal recycling sector, and then we've put those into some subsystems, arbitrary ones, overlapping ones, but they help us understand and analyze the system. And one, of course, is solid waste management. What you do, it has impacts for solid waste management and relates to solid waste management. But in fact, what is happening is happening for resource recovery purposes. So initially, the very first motive of the waste pickers to recycle is really to get some revenue, and this revenue is the material that is going into the supply chain. So we have to look at this value and supply chain of secondary materials. Of course, it has very much relevance to the socioeconomic aspects. It depends on socioeconomic aspects, and in a loop affects the socioeconomic aspects of all the involved parties, and that's why it's important to consider it. After all, if you want to do something, if you want to empower these people, help them organize, help them deliver a service to the society, local and globally, it's important to help them work as a business. And you see some of the difficulties that they're facing in that direction. To me, these are the greatest difficulties, how they can run something that is not necessarily a business, but still a cooperative or an association. So this is the underpinning, if you like, framework. So if you put all those together, what we've then done, we considered what are the detailed aspects of all those for interfaces, and then we created also a scoring system. Now, it's always risky when you're trying to translate those things into numbers, okay? But still, I think it's helpful sometimes to communicate the results to the decision makers, to policy influencers, and things like that. And what we have done there, we're having very specific things that are to be considered, and we give them a ranking. We give them a mark between 0 and 1, and according to that, we end up marking each of the interfaces. So as a result, what you end up, you visualize those 4 different aspects through this radar diagram. And what's the idea here? The idea is that if you really can see the focus with regard to each of the 4 aspects just by looking at the radar. And you wouldn't expect to get an 1 at all of those, but at least you get a feel of what's the orientation. And ideally, if those are equally important, you would get a symmetrical rhomb there. We applied this in many case studies as part of creating the tool and validating the tool. And then, of course, it has been used also by other researchers around the world. So you can read the methodology, and you're in the process of creating a simple website to upload the tool. We're going to email it to each and one of you anyway, but we hope it's going to be really used even much more. And we're very pleased to find out from our Brazilian friends that you found it very useful in practice. You've been telling us yesterday, which is exactly what we would like to see. So, questions on Intera, please. Or comments? Maybe you would like to tell us what you found as interesting.
Oh, we start using it for our reality, and it was quite interesting because you can see the difference that we have. We have some very specific thing in Brazil that's not in Terra, but it helps us to understand the complexity in all those 3 clauses that you pointed there. And was the first step very important for us to be able to go to SOCO. So I think it's a very good analytical framework that would help the cooperatives and all the technicians that are interested in that to be able to understand where they are when they start working with that and what is going around, because it's not very easy to find out where the things are going and what happened there. So it's thank you for this tool.
Okay. More comments, or really running short of time? So I will pass over to Ines, who will talk about EWIT.
It falls on me to try and compress 2 years worth of work on behalf of a large number of organisations within a 5-minute presentation, which clearly is not possible, but I'll do the best I can. EWIT. It's an acronym, of course. It stands for E-Waste Implementation Toolkit. So it is waste focused, but it's very specific waste stream, and it's also a very contemporary waste stream. Broadly, the project, its objective was addressing the challenge of e-waste management within Africa. It was a very large project. It was funded by the European Commission to the value, I think, of something like 1.7 million euros, if that's the kind of thing that interests you. It was funded under the Horizon 2020 programme, under the Innovation Partnership on Raw Materials. Now, it wasn't a strictly research-based project. It was a coordination and support project, which has a slightly different emphasis in terms of it's not just purely academic. It was supposed to produce actual tangible outcomes and results and impacts on the ground. University of Leeds was only one of 24 beneficiaries to the programme from 9 different countries, 4 within Africa, 5 within Europe. The structure, the delivery structure which was adopted was principally one of twinning. Twinning cities within European countries to countries within Africa, with the idea of facilitating information exchange and raising political profile. So the countries which we had involved within Africa were Côte d'Ivoire, Kenya, Zambia and South Africa. My own personal involvement was mostly focused around Kenya, which was twinned with a city in Portugal. Specifically within Kenya, we worked in Western Kenya, so we were in rural Kenya. We were outside Nairobi, within Kisii County, and the partner there was Kisii County itself, and also Kisii University as well. It's interesting that the challenges which Kenya faces, it's a hugely diverse country. It's a country of immense wealth in some places. It's a country of immense poverty as well. Institutionally, the constitution of Kenya changed quite recently in 2012, and waste management became a devolved function of government. There are now 47 county assemblies which were created in 2012 with the responsibility for dealing with waste. Now that's interesting because clearly we have an institutional framework which is very, very young. It has very little institutional capacity on the public side of things, and of course what happens is it's finding its own feet and it's trying to address an issue which is contemporary, and there is already obviously the informal sector is a major player, the major player. So a little bit about the context of Kenya. The toolkit which we developed was based around 4 themes: collection, technology, finance and legislation, and closing the loop. The collection was, as I say, who is actually receiving this material, post-consumer, post-industrial, post-commercial. Informal sector is a massive player within that area. Technology was an interesting one. What technologies are going to be required to deal with what is a very complicated waste stream? It's a very high value waste stream. That value is not ignored, of course. We have metals, we have plastics, etc., all within this material. What technology is actually required within Kenya, what's existing already, and what is required? And that was an interesting dynamic between the public authorities, which were very capital focused, looking for the large infrastructure development, sort of, dare I say, vanity projects, and the recommendations which we produced, which, much to their chagrin, were often, no, we don't need very high-tech technology. We need wire strippers, we need health and safety equipment, etc. Finance and legislation, that was another major issue, and closing the loop, how does all of this fit together? We produced specific guidance for each one of these areas. One of the legacy points of the project, and perhaps very fitting to do with the topic, was the creation of an online toolkit, which is the EWIT. You know, this is the outcome. It's a portal. Please do visit it. It's ewit.site. It has information and resources which are embedded principally within two interfaces: the wizard, which gives you a question and answer and produces a specific report, and the knowledge base, which is a library, effectively, which you can search. Now, that toolkit, that interface is designed for any stakeholder, really, who's got an interest within e-waste management, of which there are a broad number, and I can talk at end about who would be interested on that. The outcomes of the project, very briefly, I'll move quickly. We produced e-waste management plans for the 4 major African cities which were participating within the project: Johannesburg, Kisi, Abidjan and Koma. We did awareness raising and raised the political profile of e-waste management through national and Pan-African conferences. And certainly we can't claim responsibility for this, but off the back of that, some people within Kisi County developed the first ever e-waste management recycling project within that country. There are a number of issues around that, but certainly that did no harm whatsoever about raising the political profile of the issue. And that is it within my 5 minutes. I've probably gone over already, and I'll take questions.
Thank you very much. I worked in Kenya quite a lot, but just a very quick observation on the interfacing with the National Environmental Management Authority
NEMA
and the County Council. Just elaborate a bit, that was very useful. Thank you.
NEMA, obviously, is part of the formal sector, obviously. It's in effect, for our UK colleagues, is the Kenyan equivalent of the Environment Agency. Are on the verge of, the Kenyan government in general is on the verge of implementing national legislation for producer responsibility for e-waste within Kenya, which would produce an enormous, potentially enormous revenue stream to fund the recycling of e-waste products, mobile phones, refrigerators, lamps, you name it. So they were very much on the radar, and we did engage with them. What can I say? We're still waiting for that legislation, and have been for quite some time. My feeling is that the activity of e-waste management is already underway within Kisi, and I suspect the practical reality of recycling is going to go ahead without waiting for that legislation, I would suggest.
Yeah, I was curious on that, because history in Eastern African countries, including Kenya and Tanzania, is that a lot of very good pilot projects like this one and a lot of research is not really easily accepted by the national environmental agencies and authorities. Similar situation in Zambia as well. So I just wanted to know whether they have any interest, and any of these pilot projects can influence the national policy or not. That would be really excellent if they start understanding it and start supporting the counties, because some counties do not have even a basic person with engineering qualifications, especially if you move towards more west. The counties are very, very low in capacity. So these projects can help a lot, in my opinion.
I mean, certainly one of my take-home experiences, my lessons learned from the project, is you can't generalise about solutions and about awareness and about capacity, even within one country within Kenya, let alone within a continent within Africa overall. It's incredibly diverse challenges.
I think this is sort of a continuation of Master's question, but in a slightly different frame. I heard you say we paired experts with Africans.
Yes.
And my question is, weren't there any African experts that you could find? And if there weren't, did you create or support indigenous African expertise?
I deliberately put the project structure was a European-funded Horizon 2020 project. Now this, I believe, influences things such as that. One of the issues which we have is that the European solution, particularly to e-waste, is not necessarily exportable, not very exportable. We happen to have an extremely good expert on, for example, technology, who's got a huge industrial experience in management, recycling within Europe. But their recommendation on the technology side of things was very low tech. In terms of, I can only speak about Kenyan experience. In terms of Kenyan expertise, the expertise, I would say, is more to do with working with the informal sector and less to do with the technology. And it's about the difficulty within the funding structure is you can only fund existing legal entities. And I think that interface between the expertise locally and technologically is a difficult one. I think we had issues with it, definitely. And I think other projects in the future will continue to have exactly the same issues. But it's a difficult one, I think. So I don't know sure if I've answered your question. Yeah.
You have spoken sufficiently.
Yeah, sufficient. I suspect if I had all the answers to that particular issue, then I'd be doing very well.
It's a great pleasure to introduce you to the Seaboard. This is a very cross-disciplinary, as much cross-disciplinary project as it can get. And we have a fantastic team working on that. So instead of having the academics preaching at you, we have the actual research team who is doing the hard job on the ground, who's going to be presenting. So, over to you guys.
Thank you, Costas. So CBOR stands for Complex Value Optimization for Resource Recovery. This project is funded by NERD and the SRC under the Resource Recovery from Waste program. And although the CBOR team is comprised by a large group of academics from the University of Leeds, the core CBOR team includes Professor Phil Purnell, Professor Andrew Brown, Dr. Costas Velis, myself, Dr. John Hachlavakis, Dr. Joe Melbourne-Hopkins, and Mr. Oliver Zwirner. I have to apologize on behalf of Professor Purnell, Brown, and Mr. Zwirner because they couldn't be here with us today due to other things that they had to attend. So, the CBOR is about developing a novel approach and a toolkit for optimizing value assessment from resources recovered from waste. It's a very comprehensive analytical tool which grasps upon the most important aspects that are related to resources recovered from waste. So while there are a number of different assessment methodologies that include environmental, economic, social, and technical ways of analyzing value, there isn't yet a tool that grasps upon all four domains of value. And this is where the novelty of CBOR lies. The CBOR is aimed at looking at all four domains of value while also accounting for the institutional, governmental, and political aspects that govern the supply chains. And this is really important because it can grasp aspects on the informal recycling sector that are often overlooked. So the considerations in CBOR is about upstream and downstream parts of the supply chain in order to not only include waste management practices, but also looking at the practices upfront which create the products, the materials, and the components that are used by the consumers, and how these can then be recovered at the most optimal way. We then need to decide about the system boundaries. We have regional systems, we have national, but we have also global systems. And defining the boundaries of the system that we are accounting for is really important in order to be able to capture the right values that the system needs to be assessed on. CBOR also is trying to include advances in technology, current state-of-the-art things that are going on, either on the design upstream parts of the supply chain, but also on the management and the recovery of resources at the downstream part of the supply chains. And we also include economic and geopolitical landscapes. So this is how the CBOR framework looks like. At the first step, we have the system selection. And then we have the initial system design, which is based on the use of material flow analysis, which is the backbone of setting up the system and capturing all the processes that make up the supply chain. And then we have the conceptual value assessment. This value assessment is preliminary. It's based on the things that we know, based upon our knowledge, expert knowledge, and engagement with academic experts, policymakers, professional practitioners, and citizens, in order to capture important things that need to be captured for the assessment of the system. And then we have the metric selection. We have metric spaces, and we have environmental, economic, social, and technical metrics gathered and compiled into these spaces, as we call them, through which we select those that are most applicable in each system that we're trying to analyze. At the first step, we have the system refinement, the detailed analysis, and the complex value assessment, for which you will listen more about later on. And then we have the scenario development. In the scenario development, we assume for changes that can be made at the supply chain, and maybe changes in the technology, changes in the behavior aspects or the collection of resources, or even changes in the design of materials and products. And at the final step, we have the evaluation and reflection on the assessment of the system, and looking that if we've missed something, or if we need to include things based on the political or the socioeconomic aspects that have not been captured by the preliminary analysis. And that's why we have the loop that goes from step number 5 towards step number 3, which means that we will have to include additional metrics. This whole process is informed by our academic experts, our policymakers that are involved in the project, the professional practitioners, and the citizens. Another novelty of CBOR is about not only the environmental and technical aspects that are associated with the materials and components and products that we're trying to assess, but also on the use of modern economic theories like the systems of provision, mainstream economic theory that is suitable for sustaining long-term and sustainability analysis, and this does not include the CBA, the cost-benefit analysis that most people use. And we also include social impacts associated with alternative management options, and these are crucially important to be included in the informal recycling sector systems that we are trying to assess. Decision-making is also a socio-political process that must be understood in those terms, and thus we have to balance the socio-economic values that are included into the analysis together with the environmental and the technical aspects that have to be included in order to have a comprehensive analytical tool. And these are the case studies for which you will hear from Dr. Pachlalikis.
Right. So, I don't claim to have such a powerful voice as my colleague here already does, so I'll opt for the microphone. I think you'll all agree with me that in trying to develop and build a software toolkit like CBOR, data is a necessity. And what I mean when I talk about data is that real data from real world, that means case studies, use of case studies. So we've actually selected to focus on 4 case studies, and by now we have successfully completed dealing with the third one, which is the production and use of pulverized fly ash, when we obtained data from a local industry that operates here in the UK, the drugs industries. And we are now in the process of developing and completing the plastic packaging waste case study. In doing so, and in trying to properly model the stocks and flows of materials, we had to use a material flow software. So we chose STAN for it, which is a software initially developed by a team that works in TUVN. And what we have done by now is we've managed to create an entire material flow system of plastic packaging that encompasses all processes right from the beginning of the production of plastics products all the way to the point where they become waste, generation of waste, and then through various other processes like the recovery, the recycling, the reprocessing, and finally the exports, as well as going back all the way and re-entering the products into the production chain again, thus closing the loop. Now, a major process within this material flow diagram, which I have to say it can be used and adjusted for any city, for any country, depending of course on the waste system that each country uses. A major process in this material flow is of course the informal recycling sector. And if we're going to talk about cities like Buenos Aires or Belo Horizonte or countries like India, the informal recycling sector actually accounts for a large amount of waste that's being generated. Now I'm sure you cannot see what I mean. Let me zoom in for you. Now I think it's better. So there's a lot of waste that's generated that goes through the informal recycling sector, and from there it's either sent for recovery or for recycling or sent to landfill. We've used, for the developing of the informal recycling subsystem, a case study from Buenos Aires. So for starters, we were quite impressed by the complexity of the informal recycling sector there, which includes a lot of cooperatives and intermediaries, like for instance we have the Puntos Verdes and the Centros Verdes, which are collection centers for recyclable materials. We then have the galponeros, who are middlemen who own small collection properties, and of course the acopiadores, which are the intermediaries between the recycling industries and the waste pickers, and they are the ones responsible to decide which part and which amount of the recyclables are actually going to be sold to the recycling industries. So what can CBOR do for the informal recycling sector? Well, for starters, CBOR, with its multidimensional analysis, can in fact reveal any kind of contribution that the informal recycling sector has to the wider spectrum, of course, of circular economy, as well as to the waste management system of the country or of the cities that it's going to be applied to. And in the case, of course, of the Buenos Aires, we concluded that the cartoneros are the ones that significantly contribute to the plastic waste supply chain by a huge amount, approximately 40% of the waste that is generated there is actually collected by the cartoneros. And CBOR, of course, will help policymakers to make some more informed decisions that will maximize multidimensional benefits and optimize the recovery of value. Now, how that can actually be done in the model environment is something that I'll just have to leave to other people more experts than me, and I'll take this opportunity to introduce my good friend and colleague, Dr. Joe Wirwell-Hawkins.
Thank you. Do you want to sit? Thank you. So, this is going to dive into some slightly technical details. I'll make it brief. So, one of the unique things we're trying to do with CBOR is in the title. So, we're trying to optimize complex value, which is kind of a fancy term for just looking at various different domains of value. So, we have social, economic, environmental, and also technical values. So, what typically happens at the moment with assessments is they either focus on one domain of value, so you have something like life cycle assessment, which will measure various environmental impacts of a particular system, or it could be a waste management system. Or there are other very similar assessments like social life cycle assessment will do the same thing, but for social values of a particular system. So the problem is it either leaves you with a single dimensional analysis, or it leaves you with lots of different analyses which you then have to piece together to try and work out how all these different sets of values actually compare. So what we're doing with CBOR is trying to integrate all of this into one modelling step. And this basically involves saying, if you want to set up a model which considers all these different complex sets of values, what are the characteristics that are important when you're actually doing the modelling? So instead of saying we model environmental values in one way and social values in another way, and economic values in another way, we ask questions instead like, is this particular metric we considered, is it conserved, or can it be created or destroyed across the system? Is it attached to only the mass flows, or is it associated with the processes themselves as well? And are the values of that flow or the values of that metric within the system determined by how the system actually works itself, or are they determined outside the system in some way? And then also, how is value transformed across different processes? Is it transformed by some sort of subjective accounting method, or is it transformed by a concrete kind of physical or chemical process? So if that sounds a bit abstract, I can give some examples. So we might want to consider, maybe for the informal recycling sector, something like working hours might be, and wages as well might be useful things to consider. So working hours as a metric, that is something we should have conserved over the system. So we want to know, for whatever's coming out of our system, if it's some sort of high quality recycling stream, how many labour hours actually went into getting that. So if we can, then we can consider if we configure the system in different ways, does that increase or reduce the working hours necessary for a particular recycling rate or a particular high quality stream of recycling. But then we might also want to look at what are the income or the wages associated with that. And in this case, this is something that isn't conserved. This can be created by a particular process. If we have a formalised cooperative, for example, maybe the wages are higher. Whereas if we have informal pickers, we don't know, maybe they're lower for the same amount of high quality recycling coming out. So this is, I'm hoping this makes sense. This is how we're approaching the modelling. So this gives us a framework for putting lots of different types of metric into the same model at the same time, and trying to then compare those outputs and then change the system to see how it can be better set up. Can we eliminate some of the trade-offs that we had? Can we reduce greenhouse gas emissions without putting up child labour, for example? And then these are the sort of questions we're trying to answer with CBOR. I think I'll leave it there. And yeah, just say thank you to all the academics that have helped us that can't be here today, and all of our various partners as well. They're on this page. Thank you. Obviously, now's the time to ask you questions.
Just a quick question. In the last slide, you talked about recovery and disposal. For recovery, do you include energy recovery within that? Or do you see energy recovery under disposal? Also, what about reuse, repair, remanufacture?
I'll just give a quick answer at first. This is kind of a just conceptual diagram to demonstrate these categories rather than offer anything concrete. In John's MFA from the page before, we have energy from waste in the recovery stage.
Yeah.
The technical value is an important component of CBOR. So besides the characteristics that are related with the properties of the materials, we also look at their calorific value, because some waste cannot be recovered. It's not economically nor environmentally viable. So burning these waste in order to recover their calorific value is considered to be the best optimal process. So energy is part of this recovery process.
Personally, I fully agree until technologies are available to analyse that.
Exactly, yeah.
And what about reuse, repair, remanufacture?
We also have that. In matter of fact, one of our case studies is on construction and demolition waste, in which case we specifically look at the construction components reuse. So instead of allowing these components to fall into the waste stream, we actually look at how these components can be dismantled from the buildings or other civil infrastructures, and how we can promote their reuse over the supply chain.
Just to elaborate a bit more and add to that, this is the generic material flow diagram that we've managed to build, but the processes that you see here, some of them have been identified as subsystems. So that means that in the actual software, if you double-click in some of these processes, then there's another entire subsystem within it, which accounts for energy for recovery, energy from waste, all different processes that you can follow, different paths that you can follow in trying to recover waste. Yes?
I might have missed something, so if this is a stupid question, forgive me, but
Stupid question.
how do you account for disvalues? And how do you lose things from the system and account for leaks and losses?
We have pulled together metrics that are used for assessing resource recovered from waste or waste management practices. So in that sense, combining assessment methodologies with material flow analysis, we are able to capture things that other people include in their assessment processes, while also we, through the institutional and political analysis of the resource recovery system that we analyze, try to avoid having this evaluation of the recovery processes. Does this make sense? No.
I'll ask an example.
Yeah.
How would you put the damage caused by marine litter from plastic into this process flow? Because there's a leak, there's a disvalue.
They are already accounted in the generic MFA. Yeah. So you see here, that's the litter process. Within it, there's a subsystem that accounts for all these things that you mentioned.
Thank you.
Yeah, I suppose there's a couple of ways you can approach it. You can either, if you realise one of the flows in your system is going to have a negative impact, you can either bring in that process in which the negative impact is going to take place to within your system, as we have here. So, for example, we have this marine litter process, which there's no way you can read the text, sorry. But inside here, there's various different stocks of litter. And if we know roughly what the damage will be from a particular stock of litter in the rivers or in the oceans or on beaches, then we have a negative metric essentially assigned to those accumulating stocks, and they accumulate over time as well. On the other hand, over here we have exports from the system, and if we know they're going to go to a particular geographical region where they'll have negative impacts, then you can attach negative values to those flows as they go out of the system. So it depends kind of where you set your boundaries essentially, but there are ways of doing it.
Thank you.
The problem is just getting data.
Right, thank you very much. You really ran sort of time, that's fantastic. And this system can accommodate for anything that you can imagine. So anything that you think is important to be measured as a value, not necessarily monetary value, anything that constitutes a value, societal value. Some are monetized values, either from technical properties to real cash flows to much more elusive things that you try to measure them. So this is the beauty of this. It can measure at the same time everything. We'll hopefully be able to demonstrate that. David.
I chair the C4 steering group. What Costa says is correct, but it's an advantage, it's also a disadvantage. What the team need to focus on over the next 6 months as the project completes is how to contain that into something that actually works and is practicable and usable in practice. Yes, it can do everything, but if it does everything, it will do nothing because nobody can use it.
Can I add very quickly something to what David said?
Okay, it's work in progress.
No, I was listening, and I'm also very fond of these modeling. But when we take these things in the field, there are two issues. One is you got the fixed element in the system, which you can apply, but you also have very dynamic changes, especially in low-income countries, on the systems, which sometimes system cannot pick up very quickly. And third, you have contextual changes as well. So I think what I'm very supportive of what David said, that you have to think also a bit about how we apply this in a situation which is fast changing. Thanks.
I'll answer for brevity. This is a dynamic tool. It takes time into account. If you see the paper that's going to be released on the PFA case study, it's over the years. And the starting point is the political contextual things, and the changes are also taken into account as foreground and background system, as you would have in the life cycle assessment or in the economics and the classical economics, but not following this assumption of that the background system is stable and doesn't change. So that's why for the very first time we acknowledge that there's an interaction with the core system that you are dynamically assessing and what happens in the background. And we explicitly, for the reasons that you mentioned, have taken these things into account and have a way to discuss them. There's no perfect way, but one way. So thanks so much. Cheers. Right. And so now we're going to move on to the core thing that we've been gathered here today, which is the new tool, the project we've been working with our Brazilian project partners, the SOCO tool, and as the SOCO tool is ready, we'll be able now to release it to the world and hopefully find its way. So what is it about? Solidary, collective, selective collection and inclusive recycling. Essentially, the big dilemma that you heard it already, our question is, does informal sector recycling, do waste pickers save money to the municipality? To who else? To the state? Can they survive financially? Is it a viable financial model? Hey, what about the benefits of recycling? Are these accounted for into their financial viability or not? So these are core questions. The difficulty with waste management, as you know, there are endless financial models and endless situations and hidden flows of money, and nobody knows what's happening. And we know that Anne, for instance, Dr. Steinberg has done some really important research on that. Professor Wilson, you, at the very beginning of your career, you started doing financial modeling and trying to understand some of these aspects. Now, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to do a practical tool that is able to capture these cash flows based on the material flows, but also capture some of the socioeconomic things, the externalities, positive and negative, that are associated. So what's the benefits from recycling to the environment, carbon metrics. And then this is intended to train both the cooperatives to be able to understand their internal cash flows and operations, but also train the decision makers, the municipality officials, maybe the regional government, or also the industry. The last feature of this, in line with the CBOR thing, we take a systems approach. The waste pickers don't exist on their own. All right? You have the cooperatives, you have the unorganized, you sell to middlemen, you sell to brokers, you have the municipality. So you have different levels: structural, financial, organizational, and actual material flows. And we try to create a tool that captures all these different aspects, if you like. But the basis is taking all the stakeholders into account and taking the financial aspects. Because if we don't get the financial aspects right, we don't really know what's happening. So Heather will tell you now the great details.
So in order to develop the SOCO methodology, we have drawn on a suite of existing methods which specialise in all of these different areas of analysis. So for greenhouse gas emissions, we drew on the method developed by GIZ in their solid waste management greenhouse gas calculator, which was designed specifically with a focus on low and middle income countries. For the social and employment quality aspects, we adapted our set of metrics and indicators from the work of two researchers, Sandra Panker and Stefan Salhofer, who developed a social impact assessment methodology for analysing recycling systems in low-income countries and tested and refined their work in Peru. We also drew upon the work of Gina Rispabesin and her colleagues, who defined indicators and indices of sustainability in informal sector recycling, including a set of indicators related to occupational health and safety, covering working conditions in collection systems and sorting and processing facilities, and health and safety actions and protocols. As for local environmental pollution, we drew on an Environment Agency spreadsheet which uses a very short set of questions to do a very high-level risk assessment for waste management activities. So we pulled together our metrics and indicators from these different tools and techniques. So now I'll explain a bit about how the tool works. First of all, when using the tool, as Kostas mentioned, it's very important to do a systems analysis and identify all of the different actors at play and the volumes and types of materials that they're handling. And then for each actor, you can fill out an actor spreadsheet, which gathers information in a questionnaire kind of format about all of the things I just mentioned. And you do this you fill out this spreadsheet for each actor, and then you export the metrics and material flow information from those spreadsheets and combine them into the master spreadsheet, which displays the results in a comparative way and produces a Sankey diagram to show the material flows. We are now in the process of applying the tool to two case studies, one in Minas Gerais and one in Sao Paulo, and that is actually the purpose of our Brazilian colleagues visiting us this week to discuss and interpret the results and develop those into a user guide for other people to follow. So while we don't actually have any results to share with you at this moment in time, we hope to be publishing them in a paper sometime later this year, and we're delighted to share that with all of you here. So, thank you very much, and if you have any questions, start away.
You don't even have to bring me the microphone. I just want to ask, do you get the kilogram or the ton information from surveys, or do you register it in real time?
We do it through surveys and data collection. There's no real-time information system.
No, it's really, you know, the difficulty with the informal sector is registering data. The difficulty with waste, in general, even in the formal sector, is registering data. So, but this is an exercise that helps people collect the right data and hopefully will encourage people to register the right data. Jacqueline.
I'm going to cover quite a lot of ground, so I'm going to try to move quite quickly. I'm starting with from the Global Waste Management Outlook that both Costas and I were involved with, which came out of the a recommendation from Rio Plus 20. The recommendations from the GWMO are summarized in two jigsaws. The first focused on what needs to be done. The top half is bring waste under control, focusing on bring waste under control. The second part is moving from a linear to a circular economy. What is here is basically the waste is translated into the Sustainable Development Goals as far as it relates to waste management. But the Sustainable Development Goals, there are 17 of them, and they, in order to keep it down to 17, numbers of compromises had to be reached. Each goal is single target, cities, water, etc. Waste is a very cross-cutting issue, and it wasn't one of those 17. Now, I try to argue that that's actually an advantage rather than a disadvantage. These are the 5 waste-related sustainable development goals which would be under a high-level waste goal if that existed. So this is the virtual waste-related SDGs. If we achieve these 5 waste-related SDGs, we're actually making progress against no less than 12 out of the 17. So it's very much a cross-cutting issue. The words here are generally copied and pasted straight from the existing SDGs. So the first one, access for all to adequate, safe and affordable solid waste collection services, is a subset of 11.1 using the exact wording. This one, achieve sustainable and environmentally sound management of all waste, particularly hazardous waste, is SDG 12.4. Now, picking up, unfortunately, Barbara is still here, picking up on what you said in focusing on what's achievable in the first steps. This one, stop uncontrolled dumping and open burning, is not stated explicitly in the SDGs. This one, achieve sustainable and environmentally sound management of all waste, is actually in the SDGs as achieve that by 2020. Now, excuse my language, but who do we think we're kidding? That is completely and utterly unachievable. The ISWA project to phase out open dumps might make some traction by 2020, which is why we have put in this stop uncontrolled dumping and open burning as the intermediate goal on the way to this one. Now, the purpose, in order to implement the SDGs, the UN community is now moving into indicators. And I'm going to focus on 3 of these, the collection for all, stop uncontrolled dumping, and, as you would expect, this one on recycling. The indicator for the first goal is collection coverage. The indicators I'm showing are from the Waste Aware indicators. For this one, the World Bank website is still telling us that it is common for only 50% of waste to be collected in low and middle income countries. Our data from the Waste Aware indicators for 40 cities suggests that we have actually made some progress. Above a certain threshold, which is around income level of $2,000 or $3,000 per capita per year, many cities are achieving 95% plus. Below that level, there is a fairly linear relationship between income level and collection coverage. This is data for cities. Rural areas tend to be lower. When you crunch the numbers together, the figure we come up with in the GWMO was 2 billion people worldwide who do not have access to a basic waste collection service. For stop uncontrolled dumping and open burning, our indicator is controlled disposal. Again, the World Bank's telling us that open dumping is still dominant in middle and low income countries. So the indicator would be 0. This, again for 40 cities, suggests there has been significant progress, particularly in the upper middle income countries, and to some extent elsewhere, although clearly there is still much to be done. Again, this is cities, rural areas, figures will be much lower. When we crunch the number, we came up with an estimate of more than 3 billion people worldwide without access to controlled disposal facilities. So this, I would suggest, is no less than a global waste management crisis, and it's something we need to address. We need to achieve those first two goals of extending collection coverage to everyone and eliminating open dumping and burning. I said there were two basic sets of recommendations, summary from the GWMO, what to do and how to do it. Technologies and regulations on their own are not enough, as Costas has already said. So we need to build sound institutions. We need to make finances sustainable, and we need to sort out our data. And I will quote from Anne Scheinberg. I often use the quote. Anne has said many times there are two sorts of data in waste management. There is bad data and there is worse data. And we need to sort that. But the first one here, we need to partner with all stakeholders. And that brings one of those stakeholder groups is the informal sector. We've talked a lot about recycling, but in terms of extending collection coverage to unserved neighbourhoods, the informal sector and medium and small enterprises have a critical role to play. And there are examples here from India and from across Africa to complement our discussion today on Latin America. And modernization does not have to mean mechanization, as you can see from these examples. Going back then to this goal, substantially reduce waste generation through prevention, and the 3 R's, reduce, reuse, recycle, and thereby create green jobs. The indicator here is recycling rates. Sorry for my spelling. Here, there is no clear trend. There's a scatter, there's a lot of noise. Rates are quite high in lower income countries. If we look at Costas has showed us a different version of the same data. This is transferring that into a histogram. Costas, I will borrow your nicely colored slide. The open bars here are the informal sector. The solid bars are formal recycling. And for the lower income, the cities are arranged in ascending order of income level. At lower income levels, it is completely dominated by the informal sector. At this point, I skip 10 slides from my normal presentation, since you all know what the informal sector is. But when I give the presentation, I can see the speech bubble above the audience head, but the working conditions are unacceptable. That's true, but we need to ask why working conditions are so dirty. And to quote Laila Iskandar from Egypt, who will be known to many of you and who was the Egyptian Minister of Environment for a couple of years, who worked with the Sabaline in Cairo for many years, when she was talking to her rich friends, she asked, how can you bear to work with these dirty people? She would reply, it's not my boys who are dirty, it's you who are dirty. Because most sorting by the informal sector is in mixed waste. This photograph is taken from the web. It is hand sorting in England in the city of Lichfield. But the difference is that we have pre-sorted at source the dry recyclables, which are being sorted in this materials recycling facility, like the one Costas will take you to tomorrow. And if we can separate the dirty organics from the dry recyclables, at a stroke, we improve the working conditions and make it much easier to pull all the recyclables out of the waste. And this separation at source is already taking place. Itinerant waste buyers were the traditional system in India, and I thank Mansoor for some of the pictures here. Informal sector also often means black economy, and DFID has a major campaign to eliminate the informal economy, the black economy, to bring more people into the tax system so that governments become sustainable. But this isn't necessarily the case. There is a spectrum from completely uncontrolled activities through to legal and tax-paying organizations, and Brazil is the poster child of that. But even though FELMA's organization is formalized, we are still here today talking about the informal sector. So although I would prefer a different term, informal sector is embedded and we're stuck with it. So my pragmatic definition is basically anything that isn't the formal sector. So even though you're formalized, we're still talking about you as the informal sector because that's the convention. So there's a major opportunity for win-win solutions through partnership. We can build recycling rates, we create jobs, improve livelihoods, phase out hazardous polluting conditions, phase out child labour, and save the city money as we have been talking about. There's lots of work and guidance on selecting appropriate interventions for informal sector integration, and we've already talked about C4. To me, one of the key things is the actions, where at the interceptions of the Venn diagram. I'm very quickly going to introduce a complementary tool based on value chain analysis, which I developed with one of my students last year, was published last year. We were taking value chain analysis, which is technique developed in sub-Saharan Africa with the small farming agricultural sector to help them add value, make a living by moving up the value chain with their products rather than just selling 100 tons of bananas in 1 week, once a year. They developed a 4-stage VCA toolkit. We developed and applied this using the Sabaline recyclers in Cairo. So stage 1 is to map the value chain. This is from the graphical summary of the paper, which is on the 2-pager you have in your pack. The waste is collected and primary sorting in the collection phase. Secondary sorting in detail. This is for plastics. Shredding, washing and drying, and then pelletization. The second stage is looking at the value added at each step. This is just one example, so you can read it for white as opposed to colored, and one of the 4 plastic streams HDPE. The third stage is an indicator set identifying the barriers and constraints. And these are grouped into 3 categories. We're now becoming much more focused on waste as such, looking at the connections within the value chain, at valorization within the within the system, and the enabling environment, similar to in C4 and what we have been talking about in Brazil this morning. The fourth stage is innovative, is a system dynamic map, where we are looking at the connections between the indicators, the stocks, and the flow variables in the system. And those that are most connected have the greatest impact on the value chain and are likely overlaps in the diagram. For the Sabaline, these are source segregation, optimized waste collection, access to finance, and access to technical knowledge. And the reason I didn't read out the overlaps from the Intera diagram is because they are very similar. And so the 2 things reinforce each other. Challenges to inclusion of informal sector. We need to make the case for official recognition. We've been through all these before. I think, like me, you will have been impressed listening to Vilma this morning. We are talking about experienced waste professionals. And we need to build on and expand source separation systems. I think listening and talking to our Brazilian colleagues yesterday, one of the challenges there is extending source segregation across all of the community to give the feedstock necessary. So all stakeholders need to work together to achieve the virtual waste-related SDGs. And in the GWMO, we set out a 10-point call to action to achieve that. There were short-term actions to meet the 2020 goals, and we also had actions on each stakeholder group. At a high level, this builds on Dave Lapiniera's work. He showed that over 10 years, the proportion of official development assistance going to waste management had doubled. It had gone up from 0.15% to 0.3%, which is still totally inadequate. So to meet the waste SDGs, particularly to extend collection to everyone and to eliminate open dumping and open burning, we call for that to be increased from 0.3% to 3% up to 2030. This is just, you've got a one-pager from the GWMO in your pack. That includes the actions on each stakeholder group. I've just brought one on each here. Capacity building is something we've been talking about today. And this one is specifically build on existing small-scale entrepreneurial recycling systems while eliminating hazardous working practices, which is our topic today. Most of what we've been talking about has been focusing on recycling of things for which there is an easy market. If there is an easy market, then someone is going to come in and collect that material to sell into the market to make a living. We need to go a step beyond that. There is still resource value in residual waste, and in many countries the easy markets for plastics and so on do not exist. So there is an opportunity to use the resource value in that residual waste as a catalyst both to achieve the SDGs, to extend collection coverage in unserved communities, and to meet the wider development goals, particularly SDG 1, end poverty, and SDG 8, decent work for all. What we're talking about here is making products for local markets. So, for example, using the organic component to make briquettes in Africa to substitute for wood and charcoal as our domestic fuel, or collecting unrecyclable plastics waste to make paving slabs or building materials. It's essentially a bottom-up approach, helping communities to help themselves. Like Barbara, I have spent my career working with the World Bank and national governments and others, trying to persuade them to come from the bottom down to focus on these problems which have a fairly low political priority. Lots of the reports I've written over the years, I hope it doesn't apply to the GWMO, have simply sat on the shelf. And I've got, I think, fed up. So I'm now trying to, which is why I am enthusiastic at getting involved in this activity, to try to work from the bottom up. And the example I give is from the new charity Waste Aid UK, which is an initiative by the waste industry in the UK to try to focus corporate social responsibility from UK companies into, and waste professionals, into tackling the global waste crisis, making sure all waste is collected and no waste is dumped. This is before the charity even got going, it got involved in its first project in Gambia, working with women and developing, working with them to develop 4 business opportunities: charcoal briquettes, compost and fish meal, composting from organic waste, paving slabs from plastics. Fish meal, because it was a coastal community with a lot of fish waste. I always finish my presentations with a thank you to the millions of waste professionals around the world. We all, most of us, are working in waste, and our working conditions are a lot better than Vilma and many other colleagues are working in much worse conditions than that. Thank you. After the tea break, I'm chairing the panel discussion. Because we've been running late and because we didn't have questions after our Brazilian colleagues this morning, and if I was sitting in the audience, I would be getting quite cross and grumpy at that. I have taken the executive decision to refocus the panel discussion as a communal floor discussion session. The panel will be allowed to speak, but only 1 minute at a time each, and we're not all 6 going to answer every question, so I suggest respectfully that we delay any questions you have for me to the discussion session after the tea break.
Makes sense. Thank you, Dave. So, 10 minutes break.
I'm going to ask the panel members to give an opening 1 minute introduction, and I'm going to ask them to respond to a couple of questions. The panel discussion session is titled Role of Circular Economy in Developing Countries. So the question that we're asking is, how does the circular economy language that we are now talking, and which is beginning to come into the mainstream. How does that reframe how we perceive the informal recycling sector? And flipping it the other way round, what opportunities does that circular economy message offer the informal recycling sector? I would like to begin with the two panel members who haven't had a platform so far. First, Professor Gary Dimsky, who is Chair of Applied Economics in the Business School at Leeds University, and also co-chair of the Cities theme in the university. Gary.
Thanks. I think that the question, how does the circular economy reframe the informal sector, is very well put. And to me, what it does is highlight the fact that the waste pickers cooperatives can be ways of looking at not just solving issues of social solidarity and economic livelihood, but also getting to increase recycling. We heard this story that shows us, however, that this is a fragile situation, and in particular, it makes us remember that the title of Celso Furtado's book, The Long Dawn. So there's tensions between three things that I want to highlight here. First, to say that the circular economy is plugged between the need for residents of informal areas to be proactively involved. They have to be on top of things. However, they need flexibility on the part of a government, and that's got to be a government that has the capacity to respond to those emerging social needs. And thirdly, this depends on the willingness of households throughout the cities involved, or towns involved, to participate in basically giving and engaging in solidarity activities. There's a lot of challenges here at the local and governmental levels.
Thank you, Gary. Next is Anne Scheinberg, whom I think is known to many of you. She has been at the forefront of economics of recycling and informal recycling around the world for many years. Anne.
Thank you, David. So I put this up. I just wanted to say about this, about 20 seconds. This is a real-time data registration system that we developed for the informal sector in Colombia, in cooperation with SEMPRE Colombia, the Producer Responsibility Product Stewardship Group. And the Colombian government has adopted it as their way of tracking the progress of Decree 596, which is the decree for formalizing informal integration, formalizing the informal sector. This is a transaction-based system. You have incoming and outgoing transactions with trucks or waste pickers. You have a list of materials. You can program a list of materials. You can enter data at a smartphone. You can read data from the scale to a computer. You can enter data on the computer. If you could put this together with your complex data system, you would really understand a lot of stuff. Because even without the complex analytics, and the analytics are still in development here, this has taught us a whole lot of things. And also teaching junk shops and recyclers and cooperatives to use it has been a very interesting process, as Dr. Davis said. That's the first thing I want to say. Real-time data registration is possible, and for the circular economy, it's probably essential. The second thing is that you can't solve it all in the recycling system. For example, in the Shirai system, you can't solve some of your problems without working on the price of disposal and without working on how collection is paid for. And the third thing that I want to say is that when I went to the ISWA Circular Economy meeting in Brussels last year, around a year ago, and they said kind of deadpan, oh yes, we have a perfect hazardous waste management system, but we lose 20 million tons a year. Then I thought, how can you talk about the circular economy without understanding, as long as you have to stop denying all these activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Amelia?
Shall I take this away?
Please. What opportunities does the circular economy movement offer the informal recycling sector?
Well, I really don't know. I have a lot of questions about that because I think lots of people just taking recycling for granted, and you shouldn't do that because you have to talk about carrying. You can't just take recycling for granted and carry on as a consumer as usual. That's one problem. The other thing is we start talking about economy of the steady state. It doesn't work. Ecological economy, it doesn't work. And then now we move to a circular economy, but we haven't talked about the deep down where it's the problem. We have now a concept that everyone is just scared to talk about. That's supposed to be ideology. If you don't have an ideology, everything can fit. It's like Alice Cat saying, if you don't know where to go, you can go everywhere, anywhere.
Thank you. Jacqueline?
Well, no, it's not the word. No, I can say this. I think I agree with Emilia because it's a new name to old concepts, I think, because many times you said about recovery resource and about sustainability and things like that. And in all this debate, I think you have to really face some important questions. First of all, I think you have to consider the different actors, the different needs, the different capacity, because you have a tendency to work with models, with unique models. You have really to be able to work in a bottom-up approach. If you don't have this capacity to see what's happening in reality, and with the tools you have and with the theories we have, try to solve the practical problem, we will continue proposing tools and methodologies, and the problem will remain. Okay? So the last one, I think you have to learn with informal sector and think how to meet these two words, okay? To how to do these two different works speak each other.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Costas, you have given us this 5-page think piece on recyclers and the circular economy. I see you have 20 points there. I'm afraid I'm not going to allow you to give us all 20 now, but if you would like to select one in 30 seconds, that would be helpful.
Yes, thank you, David. I've spoken already too much. So, having the privilege of being associate editor of waste management and research, I can invite myself and I can write whatever I want. So that's, yeah. So please read this, but in a few weeks, 2-3 weeks, it's going to be an editorial for the latest version of waste management and research. And if you like it, or if you don't like it, tweet about it, do something, upload it on Instagram, social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever you like. One point to make. Circular economy is occurring at the background, at the backstage, if you like, of the fourth industrial revolution, which means data and means automation. And this is changing the way we understand the world, the way we operate, the way we manufacture and consume. And the key outcome for the sector is that it's one of the very first sectors will be impacted by job losses in our affluent world. Robotics, automation is really already occurring at commercial scale. Apple has introduced its robot that takes back the iPhone and disassembles it. Right. Without any waste management. The concept of waste management for the iPhone, for Apple, is solved. It doesn't exist. So that's why I want to throw this to as part of the discussion and understand not only what we have experienced so far, but also what is coming to us as part of the formal and also the informal sector. A new pressure, a new challenge for the sector.
Thank you. So, we have been short of time for discussion through the day, so now is your opportunity, Mansour.
Okay. No, I'm very excited about this meeting. I just want to open this discussion a bit more, and my question to the panel is do we need to change the language or rhetoric of what we are trying to say, especially to bring the right political changes? And it connects back to what Professor Gary Minsky was saying earlier. So, since I will be short, but just to give you a bit of background, in 1982 or 83, first refereed paper appeared on waste speakers by Professor Chris Furley from York University. That is 36, 38 years ago. And if we see the situation now, there are two big changes in those cities which he researched. One is the very big movement of the collection companies, especially from China, Turkey, Malaysia, and any developed country which are moving into those cities which he researched. And second big change is the global trade of waste, which is obviously increased quite a lot, but we don't have the right evidence for that. So my question in short is, do we need to change the language and bring the current language into this discussion, which is about ecosystems, where everybody has a right to survive and flourish, and that is a business language which is more common. Do we need to bring in which I think David already touched the language of market systems, because everything is very well connected. So it's not only about informal sector, but the whole market operates, and a lot of it is very established private sector, in my opinion. And the third is, do we need to think about how we push innovations to a scale, because a lot of innovations are happening even in this sector, but how we support it to go to a scale. So my main question is about, is it the right time to think about changing the language of this discussion to achieve political gains? Thanks.
Okay, I'd like to ask Gary to start on that, please.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess my answer would be, yeah, we have to. There's a need to recognize that whilst the ideal of the circular economy is not only ideal for material recycling, but also for strengthening community ties and solidarity and increasing flows inside the community, that at the same time all of these communities live inside bounded areas that have inflows and outflows, capital and current account imbalances, and we need to be sure that the investment necessary is there, that we need to be assured that the governments have the capacity to protect their areas. There's a lot of stresses and pulls, and I really like the thematic in the CBOR of complex value. So we need to introduce these different layers and really need to move toward a new model of value distribution for the global economy. But that's a project that is yet to be, we hope to undertake in some way sometime very soon. It's very critically needed.
Thank you, Gary. As I said, I'm not going to go along the panel and ask everyone to respond to that question. Everyone will have a chance to respond, as we go through other questions. So I'm asking for one volunteer who really wants to say something in response to that question. No one? Shall I allocate it, or shall I simply move on and let you respond?
Respond yourself.
Okay. In the GWMO, one of the one of the things we were trying to do was to make the political case for waste management. We started focusing on the public health and environmental problems and the global waste management crisis, 2 billion, 3 billion people without access to services. We were then asked to put dollars to that, in that it's dollars that politicians respond to. So we looked at the costs of inaction. What is the cost to society of cleaning up the mess if we don't do it properly in the first place, as opposed to the cost of proper waste management? And the data is pretty lousy, and you could take the view, we shouldn't do anything till we get better data, whatever. But our answer appeared to be that the cost of doing the current situation, the cost of inaction, was costing society 5 to 10 times the cost of doing waste management properly in the first place. And our recommendation very strongly was that that is strong enough evidence that we need to do something now rather than waiting forever till we have better information. And the third, but even doing that isn't necessarily going to give you political action. So we focused very much on waste as an entry point. Hence the virtual waste SDGs, giving you an entry across 12 SDGs. We looked at climate change, if you do waste management properly, including phasing out open dumping, controlling methane, recycling, displacing carbon elsewhere, waste prevention. Our best estimate was that good waste management would reduce global greenhouse gas emissions by between 15 and 20% across a whole range of sectors. Marine litter, big problem now, getting lots of political attention. If we can extend collection coverage to everyone in developing countries, eliminate uncontrolled dumping and open burning. I don't have the numbers to prove it, but my gut feel is that will reduce the source term for marine litter by more than 50%.